How much more will Breadloaf Bakery have to sell to preserve its profit margin? Welcome to another analysis drill. So in this analysis question, Breadloaf Bakery has 3 employees. 2 of them earn minimum wage, while the others earn 1.3 minimum wage. Next year, minimum wage is expected to increase by 10%. By how much would Breadloaf have to increase its sales volume in order to preserve its profit margin? Here are some pieces of data we're given to start with. Current profit margin is 10%, fixed costs are 60% of total costs, and labor costs are 2/3 of fixed costs. Now, think for a while if you have some questions you'd like to ask before you start coming up with your answer. I have a few that I want to ask, and then after you've thought of yours, listen to mine, and then do your answer. So my first question is, are we aiming at preserving the profit margin in percentage or in dollars? And the answer is in percentage. So we want to keep the profit margin at 10%. My second question is, are those 3 employees all of our labor costs, or are there other labor costs? And the answer is yes, they are all of our labor costs. My third question is, will the employee that earns 1.3 of minimum wage, will its salary increase? And if it will increase, will it increase by 10% because the minimum wage increased, or is their salary fixed? And the answer is their salary is fixed. It will remain the same value in dollars as it was last year. And can I assume that the price will stay the same? So I'm going to change the sales volume. Will the price be the same next year? And I can assume that yes, the prices will be the same. Now, I could have asked many questions about values and tried to get to the value of revenues, the value of profits, the value of any kind of costs, and I don't have any of those. The interviewer tells me that they do not have more data to give. So if you had thought of questions in that of that kind, then the answer is I don't have any. Okay? So now take your time, think of your answer. Remember to follow the 4-step approach that you learned previously, and then watch my answer. The way I want to solve this question is by first drawing the current profits and losses statement, because it seems a bit confusing to me with all the data that I was given. Then find the increase in labor costs, because they're going to change because they're the first thing that are going to change. They're the first data of change that I got. Then find the subsequent increase in fixed costs so that I can start changing our sales volume and subsequently our variable costs and our profits to maintain a profit margin of 10%. Okay? So first step, draw current P&L. So I have revenues, variable costs, fixed costs, which are labor costs and other fixed costs, and net profits. And this reminded me of something. I would like to know if I should consider tax here, and I'd like to know if we have the tax rate. An interviewer tells me that I can ignore taxes for this case. It'll be simpler like that, and okay, sounds good to me. So I know that revenues, I don't know what revenues are, and I'm not going to figure out what they are. So I'm going to call them 1,000. I'm going to set my revenues as $1,000 because that seems like it's going to make it simpler to me. When I find what new revenues should be without changing the price, then the percentual change in revenues from 1,000 to 1,000 and something, 1,010, 1,020, 1,100 is going to be the percentage change that we need in sales volume. Okay? So I'll set that as $1,000. I know that my profits are 10% of revenues, so they are $100. I know that my total costs then are $900. I know that fixed costs are 60% of total costs, so they are $540. And this leaves variable costs with 40% of total cost, which is 360. Now, I know that labor costs are 2/3 of fixed costs, so they are 360, and the remaining 1/3 is other fixed costs, 180. Okay? So this is our current P&L. Let me take a look at what they look like, just so make sure that I'm not that nothing's wrong. I'll just add them up. So 360 is 720 with 180, 900 plus 100, 1000. So that looks okay. So I've drawn my current P&L. Now I want to find the increase in labor costs. And the way I want to do this is I have the current labor costs in dollars. I'm going to find that current labor costs in terms of current minimum wages. And then I'm going to apply the increase in minimum wage. So I'll have the future labor costs in current minimum wages after the change. And then I'm going to convert that to dollars by finding the difference, the ratio between current labor costs and future labor costs in current minimum wages, in terms of current minimum wages, and multiplying it by the labor costs in dollars. Okay, so let's start. Our current labor costs are $360 in the hypothetical dollars that I created. And minimum wages, in minimum wages, those costs are 2 employees at 1 minimum wage each, plus 1 employee at 1.3 minimum wage. This means they are 3.3 minimum wages. And now we're going to multiply the salary of those 2 employees by 1.1 to add 10% to them, and the other is going to remain as it is. So 1.1 times 2 times minimum wage plus minimum wage times 1.3. This gives me 3.5 W. Okay? Now, this means, now let me plug in those 360 here and multiply it by the ratio between those. So that's 3.5 over 3.3 because that's the future wage divided by the current wage, and I'll multiply it by current wage in dollars. Okay? So now let me toy a bit with this fraction because it seems like it's going to be very complex to deal with. I'm going to turn this into 7/2, that's 3.5, times 1 over 3 times 1.1, though that's divided by 3.3. So this means 7 over 6 times 1.1. And 360 divided by 6 is 60. So I have 60 times 7 divided by 1.1. And this is 420 divided by 1.1. And since 100% divided by 1.1 is 91%, I want to subtract 10% of 420 and add back 4.2. So I'm going to have 420 minus 42 plus 4.2, which is 1%. And this gives me 382.2. Now I want to find the increase in fixed costs. So that's going to be pretty simple. I have $1,000 in revenues, 36% of that, 360 in variable costs. I used to have 360 in labor costs. I have 180 in other fixed costs, 100 in net profits. We've seen all this. Now my labor costs are 382, so my new fixed costs are 562.2. Okay, so next step is finding the increase in revenues while preserving the profit margin. So what I'm going to do this is I have my current P&L here, which is $1,000 in revenues, 360 in variable costs, 540 in fixed costs, and 100 in net profits. In the next year, I don't know what the revenues are going to be. I don't know what net profits are going to be. Variable costs are going to be a percentage of revenues, and fixed costs, I've calculated what they are going to be. So my revenues are going to be, I'm going to call them variable R for revenues. Variable costs are 36% of whatever my revenues are. Since my price didn't change, my variable costs should stay the same as a percentage. Um, Labor costs are now 562.2 as we've calculated before, and my profits are P for profits. I don't know what they're going to be, but I do know that they're going to have to be 10% of my revenue. So P over R equals 10%. And now I'm going to plug all this into an equation and try to solve for R. Okay? So I know that my profits are equal to my revenues minus my variable costs minus my fixed costs. So my profits are equal to my revenues minus 36% of my revenues minus 562.2. If I plug the 10% profit margin into P, I get 10% of my revenues are R minus 0.36 R minus 562.2. And this means, well, if I toy a bit with this again, I get 0.1 revenues equals 0.64 revenues minus 562.2. And if I play around again, I get 562.2 equals 0.54 revenues. And this is a little bit hard to calculate. I'm not gonna waste a lot of time doing this for you, but I can see that it's just above 1,000, which is what I expected. If I subtract 440 from 462, I get around a 22.2. Yeah, I got 22.2, and 22.2 divided by 0.54 should be around 44.4. So I should get something close to 1044.4 if I actually do the calculations, which I should do after doing this reality check. I will get to revenues equal 1041.1. So this means a sales increase of 4.1%. And while this sales increase of around 5% over a year might seem like something simple for a simple bakery to do over a year, I find it to be a little bit worrisome, initially at least, because with a 10% increase in minimum wage, we might also face inflation in this country, and so other costs might change too. I wouldn't be surprised if variable costs and other fixed costs changed along with the with labor costs. Now, if it is confirmed that there will not be a change in costs, then we might not even have to increase sales by 4%, because if we increase sales, then there comes a increase in variable costs with it. So the 36% of all my sales go to cover my variable costs. If we can increase price by just a little bit, we would cover that cost increase easily. So we have a cost increase from 540 to 562, so that's a 22.2 cost increase. So a price increase of only 2.2% would already cover those increased costs, and would even increase the profit margin. It would be over 10%. So I might want to consider that option before trying to increase my sales. Of course, if I do want to increase my sales, then I can see several ways to do that. So some examples of potential ways to increase sales are: one, adding more expensive products in the portfolio. So if I'll put something even more expensive than everything that I have in my portfolio, so clients that are willing to spend a little bit more would like to do so for some more value-added products, they'll be able to do so, and so we can increase our sales like that. We can add product categories that we don't sell today. So let's say we don't sell sodas, and a client comes in, buys a bagel, and they also want to buy a soda, but we don't have them, so they don't buy them. Now we'll have sodas and they'll buy them. Or we can promote bundles to increase average ticket. So let's say client comes in and will buy a bagel but won't buy a soda. But if I bundle them together and give a $1 discount on my soda that has a $2 profit margin, then I'll still have a profit margin on that soda, but I'll convince a client that would not give me soda profits to give me soda profits. Now, this was my answer for this analysis. You can compare it to yours. If your answer is different, even if your insight's different, especially if your insight's different, it's not a problem as long as all the elements within all the 4 steps are contained in your answer. And I want you to pay attention to something here. I mentioned that there are several ways to increase those sales in my insight after my insight in my next steps after my analysis. And that might lead the interviewer to ask me what are other ways to increase sales, or other ways to increase revenues, or other ways to increase profits. And that would be a good thing. That would be a good follow-up question to get, because it's not a really hard follow-up question. You get the opportunity to show your business sense to the interviewer. And if you do that, you're definitely going to be doing what many candidates didn't do, which is get an extra question, do an extra answer, and you'll have another chance to impress your interviewer. But when that happens, I need you to pay increased attention to the wording of this question. Because if the interviewer asks you to increase volume of sales, it's one thing. If they ask you to increase revenues, it's another thing. And if they ask you to increase profits, it's yet another thing. So pay a lot of attention to that so that you make sure you're answering to the correct question. Okay? I hope this drill helped you, and I'll see you in the next one.